Good evening and welcome to Zion's Banner. I'm starting just a little early here just to make sure that everything is in order. Um, Sometimes things go a little funky and it seems to like to throw me off a little bit. So I thought I'd give a early kind of shout out, get everything ready, make sure that everything's working, give it time to stream, do everything there. Um, it's good to start seeing people stream in. It doesn't show. I thought it would. We have one new subscriber, which is an interesting story. I don't know if she'll be with us tonight, but it's Christina. I knew her family when I was doing Bible studies at her house with her parents attending, and she found me on YouTube and decided to subscribe. So I'm excited. And I hope that when she can't be here, she'll tune in afterwards. We used to talk apologetics and the scriptures right there in her living room, and I got to know the family and the kids. So it's always cool when that sort of thing happens. So I'm thrilled for the people that are away, but I'm also pretty excited to have a few homebodies here too. So that is really good. It looks like everything is streaming okay, and we are at 7 o'clock. I already see the chat. Shout out to Warrior Woman and Samuel, of course. Steve, I think you get the award for being the first one here tonight. At least it's a close toss up. And I'm going to go ahead and make this announcement now. Mr. Phil Fox is on, and I will be on his channel Sunday. Now, I've included that earlier in the chat. I don't know if it shows or not. So I'm going to say to Steve, if you don't see it, I'm sorry, not Steve. I'm going to say to Phil, if you don't see the URL for your show Sunday, I don't know that I can get to it and keep streaming, but throw that up there. And so you guys are welcome to enjoy a fun time that me and Mr. Phil Fox are going to have on his channel. It was great getting to know him by phone. We talked for quite a while. I'm excited about what he's doing, and he's getting out there now. And already they're getting some interesting questions up there. So we'll be talking about Jesus in the Old Testament Sunday. I'll be going right from teaching Sunday school, grabbing a cup of coffee, stretching for a few minutes, and then I'm excited to be on Phil's show. And if you can't get that URL, maybe I can try to throw it up. But I'm always wondering how many windows I'm going to get away with in my browser. So that's where we're at tonight. Let me get the PowerPoint up and running. We're going to have an interesting discussion. We are not going to completely cover all of Maimonides' works because we can't. That's just the way it is. He was a very prolific writer. We're going to learn something about the 13 Articles of Faith and how they affected Jewish-Christian dialogue and where things came up from. So you should see that coming up momentarily. Again, we always have the delay. Sorry about that delay. It's just kind of the nature of the beast. And so making sure that there's nothing on my end. Nope. It looks very good. It looks like everything's up. And so we're going to talk about in what ways Moses Maimonides has biased the discussion between a Jewish audience and as far as the gospel, or Jewish audiences as far as the gospel. Now, the point of this is that apologetics is not only affected by the arguments that are going on now, but by arguments that have been hardened or absorbed. And in the Jewish frame of work, Maimonides has had a dramatic effect. What he has to say, we will see, has been absorbed, and it forms the basis of many objections to the gospel. And I'm seeing, Elizabeth's here from down under, and Nate's here. So I'm seeing some of the mods come on, which is really also excellent. By the way, I now know it snows in Australia. Elizabeth sent me a wonderful picture of a kangaroo in the snow. So that was really neat. She posted that on Facebook. I actually got to hold a baby kangaroo at one of the churches I was at. There's a story behind that, but that was fun. So, just a quick shout out there. Before we get too far into this, we're going to have to discuss who Maimonides is. Now, tomorrow we'll talk a little bit about not every Jewish source was around at the time the New Testament was written. And we have to be careful with sources. Maimonides comes into the picture in terms of the Middle Ages. So he's not part of the discussion during the Pseudepigrapha or the Dead Sea Scrolls or even the Mishnah. So his effect on the gospel and it being discussed among Jewish people and it being responded to by Judaism occurs later. And so I want to give you that kind of understanding that there's a difference between looking at what people understood in Jesus's day in terms of the writings that were around or could have been around, and then looking at later sources. So I don't want you to think that the gospel writers were directly interacting with Maimonides. Maimonides is more interacting with the development of thought that came out of the gospel writers. And so that's terribly important. And thanks for the folks throwing the URL up for Sunday. So let's talk about his time period. He's roughly 1135 to 1204. So you can see that he's a late source, but he's extremely influential, as we're going to see. Just don't put him in the New Testament framework. The New Testament writers not interacting with Maimonides at all. Maimonides is interacting with sources that would have been available and then later sources, and then their actual existence. By the way, again, I always cite where I get things. And so you need to understand that I'm not picking a Christian source. By the way, Christian philosophical sources will mention Maimonides because he was a Jewish theologian and philosopher, as we're going to see. And he does some interesting things in the area of philosophy and theology. So we're going to look at Maimonides kind of at his worst, but there are some positive contributions that Maimonides makes. It's just Maimonides is at his worst really biases the conversation as far as the gospel. So I picked a Jewish source, not a Christian source, so that you would get how Jews view Maimonides, which is what I really wanted you to get. And of course, I went again to the Jewish Dictionary of Jewish Words, the same ones that did the other Jewish dictionary, the Jewish Encyclopedia, I should say. And this Jewish Publication Society, so this is JPS. So it's the furthest thing, in a sense, removed from a Christian source. The writing may be a little small here. This is a little more detail about Maimonides. He is Moses, son of Mammon. He Latinized his name into Maimonides. Now, he is part of what's called the Sephardic Jews. And there's kind of a switchover as to how different Jewish communities developed. He's what we call a Sephardic Jew. He's native to Cordova, Spain, but he's living during the time of the Muslim invasions when the Muslims went into North Africa, Egypt, and that time period. So we're talking about the period of time where you'd have like Moorish Spain. Spain is just kind of becoming, actually Catholic Spain is in process in a sense. I mean, there's some overlapping, and I don't want to get too far into the offense. What you are going to need to know, and this is even going to come up when I do a discussion or ring teaching, is that Maimonides was influenced by Islam, interestingly enough. He went to South Africa and eventually Egypt. He died in Cairo. And he is known for his philosophy, Jewish theology. He's known as Rabbi Moses to the scholastics. He's probably the most celebrated. See, this is where his influence comes in. He's the most celebrated Jewish philosopher of the ages. One of his big works was his Guide for the Perplexed, which I also have in Logos. So Logos has some excellent Jewish studies material around. And I actually have that in, I believe I have that in Logos, and that's available. Now, again, we're going to look at where he biases things against the gospel, but do realize he makes some contributions to philosophy and theology that are not all bad. Um, but the ones he makes that are bad are really bad. Okay? Um, he addressed semi intellectual Jewish thinkers. He actually stands in opposition to some of the rabbis and sages. As we're going to see, not everyone liked Maimonides and what he ends up doing in his 13 articles. But his influence was so wide that it sticks. It gets inculcated, it enters Jewish thought, and gets really kind of stuck there. Um, he's writing a lot of his material to Jewish thinkers who are, it says semi-intellectual Jewish thinkers, and they're asking questions of Jewish theology. Uh, and there is some mental confusion because he's going to do some stuff with Aristotelian thinking. And so there's a question about faith and reason. Isn't that interesting? That question was going around even back then. Maimonides systematizes Jewish thought. There were some statements of faith previously, but he's really kind of the great systemizer of Jewish thought. And so that's part of his influence. He believed that one could indeed respect philosophy and still have faith. In other words, his argument is he kind of synthesizes some thinking, which includes Aristotelian thinking and Jewish theology. He stressed the oneness and infallibility of God. He relied heavily, or was heavily influenced by Muslim thinkers. You see, Averroes, who's a Muslim thinker who does much the same thing he does in systematizing and bringing Aristotelian thought. So what Averroes does is bring Aristotelian thought and try to synthesize it with Muslim faith, and he's influenced by Averroes. He was Aristotelian as opposed to Platonian in his thinking. He's influenced by Plato, Platonius, as I said. He's also influenced by Philo. And so he creates his own synthesis of these philosophers. And of course, he's influenced by Platonius. He influenced, now here's a name you should recognize, Thomas Aquinas. So I want to be a little careful. He was influenced by Aristotle, but he prefers Plato. So I may have, did I say it the other way? I may have said it the other way. Let me correct myself. Strike that, switch it. Okay? But he creates his own influence. The interesting thing is that he influences Thomas Aquinas, who majorly influences the church. And so he's around. He influences Baruch Spinoza, but Baruch Spinoza later gets kind of excommunicated. So, background there. And we're going to see kind of where he comes in. You just need to get a flavor for this guy. Okay? He is going to be very focused on God's oneness, which is going to affect gospel conversation with the Jewish audience. Okay, he did offer proof for God's existence, so he didn't believe that doing so was a problem, such as God's first cause, first mover, necessary being. Those are, by the way, three of Aquinas' proofs for God's existence. Unlike the Greeks, he believed God was efficient as well as the formal and final cause. So he believed that God kind of more directly caused everything. He argued for the Greek philosophers argued for the eternality of the world. Plato believed the universe had always existed. He would be very much in line with a Carl Sagan's, the universe is all there ever was and all there ever, well, not all there ever will be, but all there ever was. That's the way the Greek philosophers did it. He didn't agree with that. Now realize he believed God was the creator from Jewish theology, and if the universe was eternal, that would create problems with God being the creator. So the Greek philosophers, like Plato, believed in the eternality of the world. But Maimonides felt those arguments were inconclusive, um, mainly because he believed in God's omnipotence, so he could create whatever duration, as far as the universe there was. It could be this old or that old, and it wouldn't matter because God was all powerful. By the way, the source I got that from is fascinating. This is out of the Baker Encyclopedia of Christian Apologetics, and yet they have a reference to Maimonides. And it's a very philosophical sort of discussion here. Let's talk about polemics. Now, what's important in Maimonides are the 13 Articles of Faith, and they're still influencing Judaism today. And so you want to go ahead and understand that these 13 articles become the only creedal statement that Judaism ever fully, or I should say widely, accepts. Widely might be the better word. Okay, there were attempts to codify some sort of statement of faith as to what Judaism believes, some sort of creed or statement of faith. Some of those were pretty good. Sajid Guion tries to do it, but they never really gained incredibly broad and complete acceptance. Okay? Maimonides' articles get traction. It could be when he was offering them. It could be the situation in which he's speaking into. But his articles are the only ones that really gain traction. And they're highly influential. So people who don't even believe all of the 13 articles, okay, still are influenced by them. In fact, you can look at the branches of Judaism which are aligned by practice and see how many of the 13 articles they actually believe. So we're going to talk about these 13 articles, and I want to read them to you, but don't be fooled, because when I read these 13 articles, they're going to sound pretty good. They really are, but when you understand what Maimonides is saying and how much of this is a polemic against gospel faith, they're not going to be as attractive. Now, God exists. That's not a real problem. He believed that God existed. He was the creator. We're going to look at the exact, we're not going to look at the way that one's worded. That one's not really such a problem. I believe in perfect faith that God is the creator, and apart from him, nothing was created, essentially, is kind of a paraphrase of that article. And that's not such a big one. God is one and he is unique. Now, that doesn't sound like a real problem. We're monotheists if we follow Jesus. God is incorporeal. Now, we're going to talk about that. That means without a body. And that sounds pretty good. We're not Mormons that believe that God the Father presently has a body, but it's problematic when we look at the way Maimonides understood this. God is eternal. So he's not at all created. He always was. Prayer is to God only. That doesn't sound too bad. The prophets spoke truth. We're not going to really fight over that one. We're going to see some of these we're going to have a problem with when we look at the way Maimonides understands these, the way he meant them to be believed. Okay, it's not only the way Maimonides understood them, but it's what they really mean. When he's talking to a Jewish audience, what do these articles really mean? What does he intend them to mean? Okay. Moses is the greatest of the prophets. Now, that's terribly important. The written and oral law, Torah, were given by Moses. Now, there's some formulations of the 13 articles of faith that simply say the Torah was given by Moses, but that's not what Maimonides means. When Maimonides uses the term Torah, he is referring to both the oral and written Torahs. So you have to understand this. Maimonides is, again, the end of the 11th, beginning of the 12th century. The Talmud has been codified and compiled by this time point. So he is referring to the oral and written laws. There will be no other Torah. We're going to see how the immutability of the Torah impacts the gospel discussion. And it really does. God knows the thoughts and deeds of men. Well, that's not too absolutely difficult. God will reward and will punish the wicked. Now, that goes back to Sajid Guion, who that was one of his 3 articles, that God indeed is just and rewards and punishes. In a sense, that's not totally problematic for us, right? The idea that God indeed rewards, that he's just, and that he disciplines or punishes. Messiah will come and the dead will be resurrected. Well, those obviously uh, is not a problem at all. We would believe that, that there will be a resurrection. Um, Now, I know there are certain groups that make that a conditional resurrection. I have a problem with that. I have a problem with annihilationism and what's called conditional immortality, which is the way some groups would look at that. Um, so, no, I don't believe in conditional immortality, and there's some reasons for that. Um, but those are the articles. Now we need to understand what these mean to a Jewish audience, okay? Because so far they sound pretty good. In fact, Moses Maimonides become part of what's called the Yigdal, which is in the Jewish prayer book, and then they become part of what's called the Adonolam. Now, the Adonolam, the way it's worded, could be recited. The Adonolam is quite beautiful. But when we look at Moses Maimonides' articles, if they're understood as they were written, there are some problems. So let's get into what Moses Maimonides means and what his Jewish audience would understand. Article 2, I believe, now I'm taking the wording of an English translation of the 13 articles. So I've gone from that summary statement to a closer translation. I believe with complete faith, some will say with perfect faith, blessed be his name, is a unity, and there is no union in any way like him. He alone is our God, who was and is to be. We're going to discuss what's meant by one, because we believe in one God, but the issue of the Trinity is at stake here. And so we have to discuss what we believe and what Maimonides means and how he does a flipping that really affects uh, the gospel conversation with a Jewish audience, particularly a religious Jewish audience. Article 3, I believe with complete faith. Now, again, most Jewish prayer books will say perfect faith, blessed be his name, is not a body. Now, you keep getting blessed be his name. What is that? It's an attempt not to use the name of God in vain. So don't be thrown by that. Is not a body, is not affected by physical matter, and nothing whatsoever can compare to him or be compared with him. Again, we agree with this article in principle, but we're going to discuss its implications because there's some serious implications for things like the incarnation. Article 9, I believe with complete faith. Again, a lot of Jewish prayer books will say perfect faith, that this is the Torah and it shall never be changed, nor shall it be replaced with another from the Creator. Blessed be his name. So you see the immutability of the Torah there. Okay. Now, Maimonides' 13 articles are really key. They're recited, the Ma'amim, that's the I believe, are recited every morning in the Jewish prayer book. And then there is a poetic form of them called the Yigdal. And then beyond that, there is the Adonolam. So I want you to understand how much influence these 13 articles had. Okay, this is the only statement of faith that ever gained like really, really wide and total traction. There were others, they were acceptable, but they didn't gain the traction that this did. Now, what you see above is the Ma'amim. Okay, Ani Ma'amim Be'emunah, and then the article 3, Shalama, and then you have the article written. Okay? Now, what you're going to need to pay attention to is the word for one. We're going to talk about that word for one, okay? But you have blessed be his name. That's the word Baruch Shemo. It's a form of Baruch Shemo, okay? And then you have who, Yechid, and then you have Ein, not or none, and then you have a form of Yechid again, okay? He is a unity. Now we'd say God is a unity. We believe that. But I put one in parentheses because it doesn't mean what we could agree to. And that's where our real problem's going to be. Now, you need to understand what Maimonides does, and this changes the conversation in a Jewish context. I just finished having a long discussion with my dad about the incarnation and again the Trinity. My dad will bring up the Trinity, and I've had the chance to share with him. I was in Isaiah 53 and Micah 5, 2, and 3, and actually had the conversation with him around some of those scriptures. And you need to understand that he always raises the issue of the Trinity. Now, he is not Maimonidean in his theology as far as his personal beliefs, but he has absorbed this article. And so what Maimonides does that changes the conversation and creates a polemic against the Trinity that is still basically in the mind of Jewish people is he exchanges two different Hebrew words. That's why I put that up. So I'm going to try to point out the Hebrew word. Okay? And I'm going to do this by putting my little mouse there. Okay? Because I want you to see the Hebrew word. Now, it's also in the side writing here. Again, the PowerPoint is available because sometimes it's a little harder to see when we broadcast. And so, I want you guys to be able to see the PowerPoints. It's just the nature of the writing. Okay? So, he exchanges two different Hebrew words. Now, the first Hebrew word, reading in Hebrew order, you see the three-letter one there. Okay? And, the mouse moved, but I'm going to try to put it there. And what I should have done was maybe colored it. I made them bold so you could see them. Is the word echad and yechid. They're two different Hebrew words. Now, the one that's used in the Shema, which is really important in Jewish thinking, okay, that is really before Maimonides' 13 articles, the only statement of faith that Israel had was the Shema. It is Israel's most ancient statement of faith. You want to say, what is the statement of faith of Judaism, biblical and the oldest statement of faith of Judaism, biblical and even into rabbinical? You would have to say the Shema, but the Shema uses echad. He switches the word to yechid. So he says, hu yechid, not echad. Okay? And so he deliberately switches the two words. And I think it is deliberate. I don't think it's accidental and he had a bad hair day or didn't know Hebrew. I think very clearly that Maimonides switches the words here so that when a Jewish person thinks of the unity of God, he doesn't think unity, echad, he thinks yechid, unity. Okay, that's where he goes with the word unity. His mind goes to the idea of oneness in terms of yechid, not oneness in terms of echad, because of the way this is written. Now, when this appears in the Adon Olam, there's been I want you to know that this is like background. Now, let's talk about yechid versus echad, because he deliberately switches the word, but don't they both mean one? I mean, what's going on here that he would want to change the Hebrew word? Well, the word echad can mean a compound unity, one with more than one part or person. Now, can it mean one? Yes. My Hebrew teacher, Dr. Glazer, told us be very, very careful about saying that echad always means a compound unity. Okay, don't use character arguments. Sometimes when Christians are arguing, they will use an argument, but they'll oversimplify the argument, and that leaves you open to a counterattack. So don't be overly simplistic. What you need to understand, echad can mean a compound unity or one with more than one part or person. So it has the meaning that allows for it to be taken that way. Okay? Let me give you an example of echad from the scriptures. If you have your Bibles and you want to turn to Genesis 2:14, you're going to run into that famous verse where it says that the two shall become one flesh, referring to the man and woman. Okay? And so that term one flesh, libitzar echad, okay, is that term. The two become one flesh. And I point out that if echad couldn't mean a compound one, then I and my wife would be basically the same. Okay, one unit of flesh is the idea. The one unit of humanity is the idea here with Betzer Echad, but it's actually in the sentence. There's a preposition there to make it a prepositional phrase. Okay, what you need to understand there is Echad there has to mean more than just an absolute one. Okay, because I'm not my wife. Numbers, okay, has the same idea, one cluster of grapes. And it has eskol, echad. Now there's an intervening word there because it's one cluster of grapes. So you have to have the grapes and you have to have the word cluster. That's what you need to understand there. But here's the thing, one cluster doesn't mean one grape. I mean, let's think about it. They come back, they want to show the land's fertile, and they have one little grape tied to a big stick, and they're carrying it back. See how fertile the land is? Well, obviously it doesn't mean that. It means one unit of grapes. So the word echad doesn't always mean an absolute one. There are places where clearly it refers to a unity. So if I want to say a unity, like triunity or trinity, I would use the word echad. So I have no objection to using the word echad. If I baptize somebody, and I'm actually ordained, I could very well say, and I wouldn't mind doing it, I baptize you in the name of the Echad of God, in the name of the Father and of the Son and of the Spirit. Okay, and that would be perfectly acceptable. I think when I baptized my children, actually I had the honor of baptizing, I think one or two of my children, I did that exact thing. Because the word echad has the idea of unity. Now that unity can be one object, or it can be a collective that is a unity. Now here's what you need to understand. Yechid doesn't mean that. Yechid only means one, only one object, not a unity, one single or one only. So whereas echad has this idea of compound unity, within its range of meanings, yechid does not. Now, why did I spend time doing that? Because Maimonides switches one word for the other. He switches the word that can indicate a compound unity deliberately with a word that cannot mean that. It's a very deliberate thing. And you see where that creates a problem. Because the Jewish person is now having the Trinity explained to him. And usually it's not explained very well. And so immediately his mind goes back to the fact that one has to mean a single one only, or has to be a Unitarian concept of God. Now let me explain the terminology here. You probably have run into it, but it's always good to get our terms straight. When I say Unitarian, that means God is only one God and he's only one person. If I say Binitarian, then I would be saying that God is one God, but he can be two persons. If I say Trinitarian, then God is one God, but he can I want to be careful with my terminology because really you can get into heresy with the Trinity really quick. But he exists manifesting himself in three persons continually and eternally. So he has always been manifest in three persons. Okay? All right? And so I use that term. Modalism means that God is one God and one person who puts on two masks. So God can exist in three modes, but he can't exist in three persons. The modes are temporary states that he switches back and forth between. Now that's an ancient heresy called modalism. All right? And it gets very, very tricky dealing with this. But understand that the Jewish person thinks one has to mean only one person and one God. So he's very confused. He's hearing your conversation of the Trinity through Maimonidean thinking and rejecting it. So Jews are not only anti-Trinitarian, they're not really anti-Trinitarian because of the Shema. They're anti-Trinitarian because of their understanding of the Shema, which has been affected not just by Maimonides, but certainly by Maimonides. Okay? And so these writings do come after the New Testament era. But when we look at the biblical writings, we can make the point that the New Testament writers, as Jews, could have had these things in mind. We need to be careful about future stuff. We need to be careful about taking future rabbinical writings and shoving them into the New Testament period. All right? And that's just a caution. And the reason I put the caution here is because not everyone agreed with Maimonides. Is there evidence in Jewish thought that the articles of Maimonides were not accepted after the Second Temple period, 70 AD? And there is. Maimonides, even though he gained the traction, won the argument, now he has prevailed, was not necessarily accepted by everybody in that post 70 AD time period, between like 70 AD and even in Maimonides' day. Now, this is very important because you can say to a Jewish person, hey, that's very interesting, but you know what? Even your rabbis didn't necessarily buy what Maimonides understood. So I went to a great book. I think I have it right here. I can hold it up. This is a really good book for understanding Maimonides' articles and the disagreement with them. Now, I'm not saying it's a Christian book. It's written by a Jewish scholar, okay? So I don't want to, try to indicate that this is a Christian book. It's not a Christian book. It's a Jewish book, but it's a very good resource, okay, for understanding in terms of Maimonidean thinking. And we're seeing how this has influenced Jewish people, all right, how it influences the conversation of the gospel with a particularly Orthodox Jewish audience, okay? My dad is secular. He's not going to say, well, Maimonides Article 2 says. But what's going to play in the back of his mind is the understanding of the Shema that is Maimonidean. That's going to be back there kicking around sort of historically, because that's the way it's historically been understood. The reason I point this out is that not everyone agreed with Maimonides, but Maimonides wasn't around during the time of the New Testament, so I don't want to mislead, okay? Gershon Gottstein calls attention to Avot di Rabbah Natan 2, where there's a list of people born and who were born circumcised, and Adam's listed first. Now, you're saying, what does this do with the Trinity? It doesn't. It has to do with God taking form. Remember that God can't be corporeal. And so what I'm pointing out here is that the idea that God could take form was not necessarily agreed with by all Jews. Maimonides would say God can't take form. He's incorporeal. He could never take a human form. You hear this from Muslims. God can't become a man. You say to a Jewish person, where'd you get the idea God can't become a man? Well, in the back of his head is Maimonides' article that God is incorporeal. He cannot take form. Okay? He's not affected by matter, neither does matter affect him. He's not affected by matter, and neither does he in a material way affect his universe. He does it, by command and by being deity, but he doesn't, like lift up a spoon having a physical form. Okay, now that's Article 3. See, the Trinity would deal with Article 2. We'll get back to that. But Article 3 says the incarnation could not happen. The incarnation isn't a possibility. And what I'm pointing out is that before I even go to the Bible, there were rabbis and rabbinical writings that did not agree that God couldn't have form. Okay? And so what this particular Avot Rabbah Natan 2:4 has this list of people who were born circumcised. Adam's the first one. Well, you're saying, well, what does that have to do with anything? Well, how do they prove Adam was the first one circumcised? Because they say he was created in the image of God. And God didn't command what God didn't do. So, I mean, that's, sounds like the reasoning they're using. And essentially, what goes on here is that man being in the image of God, he was born circumcised. Now, I'm not saying I agree with their reasoning. What I am saying is there were people that believe that God was not necessarily always incorporeal in the sense that he could not have any form. That's a really weird sort of argument. So I'm not arguing it for it. And someone jumped in there, and I appreciate that. Actually, Maimonides is playing a falsehood by changing the Hebrew word. He had no authority to change Yechid to Echad, but Article 3 is designed to attack, in a sense, the idea that God could take form and become a man. Okay, it's polemic against the incarnation. And you need to understand that. That Maimonides' article, if it was taken the way Maimonides and a Jewish audience would take it, would indeed prevent the incarnation. Now, first of all, we know the rabbinical writings don't always agree with Maimonides, and that's why I did that. You could say to a Jewish person, hey, look, even your rabbinical, I like to do this, even your rabbinical writings don't agree with Maimonides. Okay? But the other thing is the theophanies. Now, this is terribly important. Maimonides did not like the theophanies. Okay, not at all did Maimonides like the theophanies. He considered them an adaptation to poor, stupid human beings who didn't know any better. In other words, he considered them like a teaching tool because we were spiritually children. And so that was his kind of view of the theophanies. And so he didn't much like the theophanies, but the theophanies stand in contrast to his article. And that's what I want to kind of get at here is that, the Bible itself does not agree with Maimonides. Okay? And so if you want to disprove Maimonides, there's a way to go ahead and deal with that. And that's the theophanies. The theophanies counter Maimonides. How do you like that? A little bit of rhyme there. If I was vocab, I'd get some backbeat going, and I'd turn it into an entire rap. But the rabbis disagree with Maimonides. The theophanies disprove Maimonides. So let's talk about these. If God can't take physical form or any sort of form, he can't take the form of an angel. Okay? That's what you need to understand. For God to take the form of an angel and then interact within his creation, he has to be able to take form. Okay? So has God ever done that? Has God taken form? Okay? So, the angel of the Lord is key. Now, what I did was I took the Jewish encyclopedia's discussion of the angel of the Lord. Now, I got into this with my dad. I'm going to admit it. God has blessed me. We've had some good conversations. No, he's not real responsive to the gospel, but he has allowed me to review or deal with some of his objections in review. Okay? And what he said to me was, you believe that God had relations with Mary and had a son. You're going to hear this from Muslims. And I said, no, I don't. I believe that the God who appeared as an angel, as the angel of the Lord, as an angel, could come and be manifest as a man. Or I believe more precisely that the God who manifests himself as an angel came and manifested himself as a man. Okay? And so we have the angel of the Lord. Now, this is a Jewish encyclopedia. And I said, Dad, look, let me be real clear with you. I'm not saying this. A Jewish encyclopedia points out that the angel of the Lord is God. And if the angel of the Lord is God, and God could come and manifest himself as an angel, clearly he could manifest himself as a man. But Maimonides would say, no, he can't. Okay? That really This is just a metaphor. This never really sort of occurred. I mean, if it did occur, it's sort of like a vision. It didn't like historically happen where God came and manifested himself as an angel. Okay, this is just a theophany. It's just a device. Now, this Jewish encyclopedia says in earlier biblical writings, the term melech, and then I'm going to use Adonai, okay, because the vowel markings aren't there, occurs chiefly in the singular and signifies a special self-manifestation of God. Now, understand what this Jewish encyclopedia is saying. It's saying that God manifests himself as an angel. Where the angel of the Lord says, I am the God of Bethel, which is a clear reference to deity, to God. The angel of the Lord appeared to Moses in a burning bush, saying, I am the God of thy father. Now, wait a minute. If God can't appear as a man, this angel's blaspheming like crazy. Okay? He distinguished himself from the Lord who sends him. There's several places. Now, this is a Jewish encyclopedia saying this. But Maimonides says, God can't take form. Now, what's a counter that you're going to come across? Well, there's always a counter, okay? But we'll get to the counter in just a little bit. I want you to see the scriptures before you see the counter, okay? I want you to understand that the angel of the Lord appears to Moses, and look at the text here, okay? It's Exodus 3, 1 through 5, okay? I mean, this has got to give folks like Rabbi Singer fits, okay? The angel of the Lord appeared to him in a flame of fire in the midst of the bush, and so he looked, and behold, the bush was burning, but the bush was not consumed. We know that. And Moses said, I will turn aside and see this great sight. What's the great sight? The bush that's burning but isn't consumed, that the angel of the Lord is. And when God saw he had turned to look, God called to him. What? Well, the angel of the Lord's clearly being called God. See, I've used this with Muslims. You have the story of the burning bush in your Quran. Now, it doesn't read the same, but I even asked a Muslim this, and he said, well, no, it was only God's voice. You know, like God was throwing his voice, and the bush was like the ventriloquist puppet. And I said, wait a minute, that's not what it says. It says that God called to him, and the only one in the bush was the angel of the Lord. So the angel of the Lord is God. So don't try to rewrite it. Now let's look at this one. This is important because this is Jacob. Okay? So then the angel of the Lord spoke to me in a dream. Jacob had a dream, but the angel of the Lord's in the dream. Here I am, he said. Lift up your eyes, and all the rams which leap on of the flocks are streaked, speckled, and spotted. For I have seen that what Laban is, that all that Laban's doing to you. That's cheating, Jacob, essentially, okay? I am the God of Bethel, where you anointed the pillar and made a vow to me. Who did Jacob make a vow to? God. Who's speaking? The God of Bethel. Who's the God of Bethel? The angel that's talking. Okay? Now, I want to make a point here because this is Torah. In the case of Exodus 3 and Genesis, we're talking Torah. You say, according to the Torah, the angel of the Lord is God. And so God appeared in the form of an angel. And so if you say God can't incarnate himself, he can't come as a man, I have to ask why he can come as an angel, but he can't take the form of a man. And you're going to have to explain that to me, and you're going to have to demonstrate that it is indeed true he can take one form and can't take the other. Okay? But wait a minute now. He took the form of an angel, but an angel, do we know angels are physical? Aren't they sort of spiritual beings here? I mean, here's some kickback. You know, obviously he took the form of a spiritual being. But see, you're saying he incarnated himself and he took on the form of a physical being made out of matter. And obviously that's thoroughly blasphemous now, isn't it? Okay? And there is a great point being made about Moses being told to take off his shoes for its holy ground. So shout out for that point. We might go back to it, but that's a great point. Okay, but yeah, Jeff. Okay, he takes on some sort of spiritual form, but we know that he couldn't take on physical form, and a man's physical, and so that like really can't happen, right? Well, check out Judges 6:21 through 22. Now the angel of the Lord put out the end of his staff, so he's holding a physical staff. Okay, that was in his hand, so he's been holding the physical staff, right? Um, and touched the meat and the unleavened bread. And Mr. Phil asked a good question. And so I'm going to go back to that question, Phil, if you don't mind, because he asked if the angel of the Lord's Jesus. And I'm going to give you my opinion and why I take that opinion, because I think it's really a good question. So hold on to that question for just a little bit, because we're coming down, part of the home stretch here, okay? And the angel of the Lord departed from his sight. Gideon perceived the angel of the Lord and said, Alas, look at this. Alas, O Lord God, I've seen the angel of the Lord face to face, and he expects to die. Now, why did I do this? Because he's holding a physical staff. He's appearing physically to Gideon. He's physically holding out that staff. This isn't some sort of apparition. This isn't Casper the Friendly Ghost here. And God's taking the form of Casper the Friendly Ghost. Okay? Because that's what someone might say. And Air Church is jumping in there, so that's great. Just quickly, the question was, could it be Jesus? I think it is, because when you look at the role that the angel of the Lord plays, the sorts of things that he does, and then you look at the things the angel of the Lord does, you'll notice a correspondence between what the angel of the Lord does, the sorts of tasks that are assigned to him, the roles that he plays, and then Jesus. The angel of the Lord reveals God. Jesus is the revealer of God. The angel of the Lord judges. All judgment's been given to the Son, and you can go through that. And so there are reasons that I believe that the angel of the Lord in particular is the pre-incarnate Jesus. Can I find you an exact verse? No, because I think this is an issue of biblical theology where you follow the story along. Okay? Now, the other one I really want to hit tonight is the immutability of the Torah. This is really important. You see, when I was at a meeting once, a Russian woman, I talked about the new covenant, and a Russian woman said, there will never be a new covenant. There will never be a new Torah. This is a big thing, okay? There will never be a new Torah. There is no new covenant, okay? And so she was ready to dismiss the gospel because I claimed that Jesus brought a new covenant according to Jeremiah, but she was claiming since there can't be a new Torah, there can't be a new covenant. All right? And what Maimonides says is there can never be another Torah. There can never be another authoritative instruction of God on the level of what Moses received. In fact, there can never be a greater prophet than Moses. Moses is the greater. Now, this is important because of Hebrews, where it points out that Messiah is superior to Moses. Did you think that was an accident? No, Maimonides wasn't around, but the idea of Moses as the greatest prophet was around. And so the writer of Hebrews is deliberately making a point about the superiority of Messiah over Moses, deliberately. What Maimonides does is he reverses that and says, no, Moses is the greatest prophet. And not only that, but the Torah that Moses gives can never, ever be replaced. Okay, can never, ever be replaced with any revelation of the same authority. Okay? And we say there's a new covenant. We say that the words and teachings of Jesus are absolutely authoritative for the believer. I believe that what Jesus commands is absolutely authoritative for the believer. I believe the New Testament is authoritative. But see, Moses Maimonides would say, no, it isn't. You can't believe that and be orthodox. You are a complete heretic. Get it straight. If you believe the New Testament is indeed divine revelation with the same authority as Torah, you are a heretic. So first of all, let's go to Jeremiah. And we all know Jeremiah 31 through 33, that God will make a new covenant with Israel. Not according, I love these words, not according to the covenant I made with their fathers in the day I took them by the hand to lead them out of the land of Egypt. Not according to. Okay, this is very important, not according to. I know a lot of people that are going to say the New Testament, the New Covenant, is just a reiteration of the Old Covenant. If it's not according to, he's making an entirely different covenant. Now, I'm not saying there isn't a lot of overlap. What I am saying is that there's a distinct difference between these covenants. And I know people that can't stand that. One law movement people, black Hebrew Israelites, that want to poo-poo the new covenant, totally want to poo-poo the new covenant. Okay? And so I just went to Hebrews, and I hope you'll bear with me. For the priesthood having been changed, of necessity there is a change in the law. Now, the idea of law in a Hebrew epistle is the idea of the Torah. And somebody's got it. Air Church is right on it. If you change the law and the law is implemented and the high priests are in charge of doing the sacrificial part of the law and you change the priesthood, you have to change the law that goes with it. How do I know how to do stuff anymore if the sacrificial system has been replaced? How do I know it's been replaced? How do I know it's been replaced by something? There has to be a new covenant. There has to be new instruction. There has to be new Torah. But people want to say it's just a reiteration. So I went to my doctoral dissertation, which I'm still putting in final form, and COVID may interfere with. And I'm hoping to finish this thing finally, give birth, push out the dissertation. But this is straight out of the dissertation. In fact, the book of Hebrews focuses on the temple cult. The fact that the book of Hebrews focuses on the temple cultus. That's fancy for the sacrificial system. However, it would be faulty reasoning to assume that the changes in the law discussed in Hebrews do not extend to the holy days. Okay, that's what I mean by the ceremonial aspects. Where do I get this idea? Well, I get it from Hebrews. Hebrews 4:9 says there remains a rest for the people of God. And the scripture ties the rest to the Sabbath. Now, why do I believe that? Well, because of the Greek. Okay? Shabbatismos is the Greek. Okay? And it means more than just the seventh-day Sabbath. How do I know that? Because that's what the Greek means. Let's look at it. Here's a definition. Okay, sematismos, a derivative of, and there's the derivative, a special religious significant period for rest and worship. Okay? But it refers to more than just the Sabbath. It would also refer to the holidays. Well, what about the rabbinical writings? Well, this is kind of interesting. This gets complicated. As the Christians were making the claim that the law changed, there was some pushback. This is where Maimonides, even though he's later, is echoing some Jewish thinking. But not all of Jewish thinking. Okay? Just, a strain. Okay? And so Shapiro says in 122, okay, the ninth principle teaches the Torah will never be abrogated in whole or in part. So even the sacrificial system really shouldn't be abrogated. Okay, God will never give another Torah. He makes it clear that immutability and irreplaceable of the Torah was accepted as a later development. What I went to was Davies. I have the book. It's another excellent resource. Okay? Davies, Torah in the Messianic Age, or the Age to Come. Excellent book. Society for Biblical Literature. Used it in the dissertation research. Okay? In Jewish thought, there are references to Messiah changing Torah, even hints that he will introduce his own Torah. And he goes ahead and acts at Yalkut on Proverbs 9:2. Now, this is what it says for the upshot, okay? Here, Purim and the Day of Atonement alone are among the festivals to survive into the Messianic age. Now, there is debate about this. Some sources basically say there will never be a Torah of Messiah or a new Torah, and other sources say the opposite. So it was debated, but yet there was a strain of Jewish thinking that Messiah would indeed introduce his own Torah and change Torah and possibly introduce his own. Let's get to the conclusions here as we kind of start to wrap up, and then we'll go back to questions and stuff of that nature. What we see is Maimonides had a tremendous influence, okay? In terms of the New Covenant, it's debated to what extent the New Covenant is new. That's true. I'm not going to argue that. I'm not going to be disingenuous about that. This is hotly debated, okay? Some want to make the imparting of the Spirit the only thing that's new. But I don't buy it. Given the New Covenant spoken of in Jeremiah is new to some extent, it can't just be a reiteration of the Old Covenant. I don't believe it's just a reestablishment because there are some things about it that are distinctly different. So whether it's that plus is argued, whether it's just plus alone, or whether it's more disjunctive even than that is where the argument is. I'm not going to settle that tonight. I didn't even settle that in my dissertation. What I'm going to say is that I don't buy that it's a mere reiteration. And I put myself at odds with some pretty good scholars, but I don't see that. Let's wrap it up. And let's get to some things we really need to take. These are takeaways, okay? Okay? Maimonides misrepresents the nature of the oneness of God as it's stated in Torah. He misrepresents the way Torah states that oneness by replacing one Hebrew word with another and training the idea of God's oneness being absolute instead of being compound. This creates a problem related to the gospel for Jewish people. It really does. Maimonides' disallowance for God taking form stands as an obstacle in relation to the incarnation of Messiah and reinforces a polemic against the gospel, making it more difficult to relate the gospel to Jewish people. God, however, but God, I love that phrase, but God has provided a remedy to Maimonides doing this. It's called the theophanies. So God has a remedy to Maimonides, and it's the theophanies. The theophanies disprove Maimonides. Maimonides' statements related to the immutability of God hardened and enshrined the position that the new covenant could not indeed fully be new or at all interfering with the dialogue around the gospel and Jewish people. Okay? I think the theophanies are not merely holographic images. I don't believe they're just teaching techniques. I believe they're historic events. I believe that when God appeared, he really did appear. I don't view them as simply teaching devices. And so I believe they counter Maimonides' claim that God can't take form. And I believe they're very useful with the Muslim too. And I've had the chance to do that. In short, Maimonides did affect the dialogue in relationship to the gospel and the Jewish people. He isn't the only one that affected it, but he did affect it, and he affected it to a great deal. And so you need to be aware that sometimes in the Jewish person's head, without even knowing it, his concepts are derived from a post-Maimonidean Judaism, not necessarily from a pre-Maimonidean Judaism. I already kind of touched, okay? Someone pointed out angels can be touched, so they're not just spirit. Yes. That's an interesting point because they took him a lot by the hand, and so there's physicality there, okay? And Phil, I'm going to drop the mister. I'm going to keep me online. I'm going to drop the mister, and I'm going to try to bring Phil's comment up, but it may not work because it's just the way it is. you know. So I may go this way. Let's see what happens if I do this. Look at that. Okay. Um, he says, or where are they doing right by trying to keep the law with the sacrificial system? Okay, where are they trying to? What's the focus? Is it the sacrificial system or the moral? The sacrificial system has been replaced by the rabbis, but they are very ceremonial. We're to keep the Jewish holidays. We're to fast on Yom Kippur. We're to do Rosh Hashanah, but we're to do it in relationship to what the rabbis say, given that there's no temple. So really the real authority issue we're going to talk about tomorrow. Let's see where the authority clash comes in between Jesus and Judaism and the rabbis and the Torah and Jesus. You can tune in again tomorrow because we're going to hit that. But you need just to understand that it's not purely moral like the Ten Commandments. In fact, the Ten Commandments are no longer read in the synagogue because Christians emphasize that the Ten Commandments contain the moral will of God, and that got highly irritating to people. And so what they did is they refused to let the Ten Commandments be recited in the synagogue. And so you see a lot of Jewish homes with the Ten Commandments in Hebrew, but they'll never be able to recite them in a synagogue because of this. So that's where that kind of ends up coming into play. So was the law truly meant to be kept? Huh. Wow. Phil, in the sense of perfectly no, was God intend them to deliberately disobey it? No. He set things in place to deal with the fact that they couldn't keep the law. That pointed to his ultimate solution, which was Messiah. And that's where you get into the sacrificial system. So that was his gracious provision until Messiah could come. So that's a great question. I hope that answers it. Any other great questions? There are great comments in the chat. Thank you, guys. You are incredible. And just to point out, yes, Shapiro's book is really worth having and worth reading through. Understand that it's very rabbinic. There are things that I don't agree with, but it does give you a quick understanding and an easy read understanding that Maimonides' articles weren't all accepted at the time, just so that you can go ahead and understand that. I would love to open up Zoom. What I'm trying to figure out is how to do it so I can get a link to people. Because with Zoom, you can only join a Zoom broadcast if you have the link. You need the link to get into the Zoom meeting. And I did that once with Jordan, and it did work. And so I want to do it again. There are only two things with Zoom. One, I have to get the link out there. And the other thing is that I have to not have a beginning because I can't figure out a way to put the beginning up with Zoom. I do want to say a thanks to Radical Love for being here, and I understand she needs to go, and blessings. And I just want to do that because I don't want, and send blessings. I hope everything's okay, you know. Okay. I am thrilled Air Church was here again. Sorry, there's always, this is just such an intense topic. But I think it's a worthwhile topic to understand the fact that some arguments that just take root end up creating real barriers. So, well, I'm really pleased that I got to at least present this information and say that, yeah, there's a way to deal with these objections, but just understand they've been conditioned. Not only they've been conditioned by history. And Nate, you are definitely, several times you guys have mentioned Patreon, and you guys are great. Thank you for throwing that up there. It's there. You can hit that link. Um, we did get a new patron, uh, and so I'm excited about that. Um, well, I think we're there. Um, and so I hope many other people tune in, and this gets some traction out and about with people. And I'm thrilled, that the Patreon link's up. Yes, you can support us through CPM. Let me put a link up there that I think will work. And I believe this works. Wow. Um, I'm trying to remember the link. I'm going to put the link temporarily up there, and then I'm going to test it. Okay. But I think this link will take you to our thing here. I'm going to put this up. Give me a second to test it. See, it didn't come out right. I need to remove that comment because it does a weird thing. Let me try to bring the page up, and I'll try to grab that real quick as a new tab and put it up there, and do this. And I'm just getting it on my thing, and then I'll transfer it in. If I know how to spell. And I'm going to try it. Page not found. Okay. I have a thing. I have an actual visual that I can probably put up. Just asking anybody, can you put actual pictures up? Like if you had a picture that had a link, could you actually stick it in the chat? Of course not. Let's see. I'm having a problem with this tonight. I'm going to go to pictures. And there it is. I found the picture. So I wonder if I can just bring it in. Okay, I got the URL. Okay, I'm there. And I'm going to just move the new tab here. Okay. And do that. Okay. And so it's... I'm going to open it up so I can get the URL. Okay, you still there? Okay, I'm just going to type it in. This is the best way to do this, is just type it in. I thought maybe I could do a quick, link thingy, but I can't do that. So I'm just typing it in. Okay, and then I just do the slash. mouse. Stop it. There we go. My mouse is like jumping on me. Okay, there we go. And that should be spelled correctly. And I'm just double checking the spelling. Let's see if that does it. It always wants to do Jeff Cran as a label, but it's chosen people. Okay, I think Elizabeth might have it. And I'm just checking if she found something really clever. Okay. Yeah, you'd have to go to staff. Okay. But this link should work, and I don't know why. Oh, I know why. Oh, because I didn't put a forward slash. Okay. I'm going to put this back in. You have to have the forward slash. Okay, so I'm going to withdraw this. Because you can go to the site, but it's really hard to kind of find us. So I'm going to do a paste and put the that's why. Okay. Let's see if that does it. Nope. Okay, guys, I'm sorry about that. But I believe if you stick that in your URL, that bottom line thing, it should work. And so I'm just going to give it a quick test. Chosen People does like to make their URLs a little difficult. There we go. And that actually worked. I got it. I don't know. It works. There you go. That site should do it. And I'm sorry about the mix-up. It's just the way they set it up. They wanted us to have our own pages. So that's basically where it's at. I'm going to say good night for now. Do you know Ari in Philly? Yes, I do briefly. I've met at a staff meeting. We don't have much contact with each other. But if you ever see him, say hi. Tell him who I am and how you saw me. And that link should work. So, excellent. Thank you, Elizabeth, for trying to get that up there. I just know that their site's a little complicated. So you can go to their site and look under staff, and you'll find us. And thank you to anyone who is interested in supporting us through Chosen People. I appreciate that. That's what Steve does. So you have Patreon and you have Chosen People. And if you don't want to do Patreon, Chosen People is perfectly fine. So, well, you know, I gave blood today. I'm getting a little peckish. So it works. Excellent. Thank you. Oh, excellent. Well, again, say hi to Ari. Neat guy. We just haven't had much time together. The staff's pretty spread out. But, you know, I think that's so we didn't get much chance to see each other, but I know he's doing exciting things in Philly. Hey, guys, Mr. Phil's still on. Catch us Sunday, special time on Mr. Phil Fox's YouTube station. I'm excited. And it will be great. Thank you all. Okay. Aha, there you go. Mr. Phil threw it up. It is Eastern Daylight Time. And so it's up there. It's 6 his time. It won't be 6 my time, but that doesn't matter. Thank you for clarifying that. I keep thinking, I just say 6, but I have to remember 6 means different things. So, I'm just taking off getting comfy. Okay. Excellent. Thank you for all the likes. I want to say blessings to some people. I definitely want to send blessings to my sister in the land of Down Under, where there are snow and kangaroos simultaneously. That was really interesting. It makes me even more interested in Australia. By the way, I liked Vegemite when I tried it, unlike many Americans. And so a Vegemite sandwich does not offend me in the least. Although it has been a little while, so my palate may not be as acclimatized as it used to be with Vegemite. I'm just trying to get everybody, but I can't get everybody quick enough because I'm such a horrible typer. What can I say? But there you go. Get some of those in. Well, I'm going to grab a turkey leg and be unashamedly... It's not peanut butter. Well, I like peanut butter too. I'll let you in on a secret. I actually like peanut butter. In fact, I'll let you in on a dessert you probably shouldn't eat if you're guarding calories, but melt some chocolate chips and throw some peanut butter in it, and then throw some rolled oats, and you have peanut butter chocolate oatmeal cookies. No bake. Except they aren't, and you could just eat that with a spoon. So, gonna get rid of some of the extra stuff I've got up here. Okay. And so I'm going to go back to Restream, and I'm going to say goodnight. Grab some food because I'm pretty peckish right about now. Good night, good evening, good day. Someone needs to inform me. I'm just going to put blessings because we got so many time zones if I include Australia that I can't even keep track. But that's good.